Good morning. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us on our Wednesday webinar today. Today, we are going to be talking about Social Security disability claims for former teachers. This will include a little bit of information on the kind of what to expect on disability claims, as well as information specific to teachers, including Dictionary of Occupational Titles information. There will be a little bit of information about kind of whether some teachers may or may not qualify based on their work history. So if you are a former teacher or someone that you love as a former teacher and no longer able to work, stick around. As always on my webinars, I do not take live questions. If you're watching the replay, I do not respond to comments that are posted. And the reason for that is because I don't want any of your personal information out there. When we talk about disability claims, they are so specific, so personal. And I usually kind of need to know a lot of that specific and personal information about you before I can give an intelligent answer to your question. So there will be contact information at the end. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. If you are watching this on the replay, there should be a link down below for you to schedule a call. Feel free to do that as well. Or at the end of the webinar, there is a phone number and email address. You can feel free to reach out, whatever is most comfortable for you. But like I said, I do not respond to questions on the webinar. And I do not respond to comments on the replay just because I don't want any of your personal information out there. And that is what I need in order to be able to create a good response. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about Social Security disability basics. These are things that are the same across all of the cases. We'll get into residual functional capacity a little bit, into some of the grid rules, into some of the special rules. And then at the end, as I always close out, some of the ways an attorney can help you with your Social Security disability case. A little bit about me. My name is Caitlin Wildonor. I am the founding attorney of Beacon Disability PLLC, which is a law firm based in St. Johns County, Florida. We exclusively practice federal administrative law and specifically Social Security disability cases at the initial level through the appeals council level. So it's all agency level, initial reconsideration, hearing stage, and appeals council. If you have questions, reach out. If it's not something that we can help with, we always try to put you and connect you with somebody who can. All right, so Social Security disability basics. So there are two different Social Security disability programs. A lot of times people use them interchangeably. They are not interchangeable. They are two different programs. The first program is based on what you have paid into the system while you were able to work. So that's SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. In order to qualify for that, you have to have a sufficient number of work credits. For SSI, that you have to have income. There are income and asset restrictions that you have to meet. Generally speaking, you cannot have more than $2,000 in assets if you're single and more tthan $3,000 in assets if you're married and still qualify for SSI. There are also income thresholds that need to be met. So there's a lot of that. That's kind of where the two programs differ. Is SSDI requires that you have work history. SSI requires that your income and assets are below a certain threshold. Okay. Unfortunately, and this we're talking about teachers, so this isn't super relevant here, but what I do see on occasion, and it is kind of relevant to teachers, because what will sometimes happen is you'll teach for 5, 10, 15 years. You will have your own children and you will want to homeschool them or be a stay-at-home mom and send them to school. Either way, you are no longer working. And all of a sudden you become disabled and unable to work. The problem is what I find is stay-at-home moms tend to fall into like a little bit of a donut hole because the reason they're able to stay at home is often because their spouse makes enough money so that they can continue to afford mortgage, car payments, groceries, power, things like that. So that usually pushes them out of that SSI eligibility. And because they haven't worked in several years, they don't qualify for SSDI either. So with those sufficient work credits, they have to be earned within the last 10 years. You have to basically have worked 5 of the last 10 years. So this is, and so like I said, it's not super relevant for former teachers, but it is slightly relevant because I do see that time and time again. I've actually got several friends myself that are former teachers and are now homeschooling their children or have opted to be a stay-at-home mom. And unfortunately, if something were to happen to them, they do fall in that donut hole because their significant other, their spouse makes decent money, which allows them to stay home. So they don't qualify for SSI on that end, and then they can't qualify for SSDI because they haven't worked 5 of the last 10 years. So those are the main difference between the two. For both of those programs, I don't think I've said this yet, you do, as you can see, have to be disabled and unable to work for a period of at least 12 months due to mental and/or physical impairments. Now, it's important to note that you don't have to be disabled for 12 months and then apply. You have to be projected to be disabled. So if something were to happen tomorrow and you are looking at, a 14-month period of time that you are not going to be able to work, you can go ahead and apply. Now, on the other hand, if you broke your arm, let's say, and so you're not able to work for the next 4 months because you've got to go through surgery, you've got to go through PT, you can't use your right arm at all for anything. That's not going to be a Social Security qualifying disability unless, of course, that 4-month extends into 6 months, extends to 8 months, to 12, to 16, to 24. I have seen that happen time and time again, where people think that, okay, just going out to work for a surgery, it'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, they still haven't returned to work. At that point, you've got to apply. If you are still having ongoing limitations from that surgery or other complications that have arisen during that time, go ahead and apply. As soon as you realize that you're going to be unable to work for a period of at least 12 months, then you might be able to qualify for Social Security. All right. Turning to the 5-step evaluation process. So this is when you apply, what does Social Security do with your file? First, they look to see, okay, are you engaging in substantial gainful activity? If you are working more than 20 hours a week or earning more than $1,350 a month in gross earnings, you're not going to be able to qualify. That is considered substantial gainful activity, and Social Security will not even get to the medical evaluation of your claim. They will look at that. They will say, no, you are engaging in substantial gainful activity. By our definition, you cannot be disabled. There are other kind of little mini definitions of substantial gainful activity, but those are the most common. Working more than 20 hours a week or earning more than $1,350 gross in a month is going to not get you past that first step. You'll get a denial pretty quickly. Next, Social Security looks to see, okay, you're not engaging in substantial gainful activity. Do you have at least one severe medically determinable impairment? If yes, then you can go ahead and move on to step 3. If you don't have at least one severe medically determinable impairment, Social Security, again, is going to stop the analysis there. They're going to say, nope, you can't be disabled according to our rules because you don't have a severe impairment that's preventing you from working. Okay. At number 3, do you meet or equal a listing? So they look at that severe impairment or severe impairments and say, do any of them meet or equal a listing? And if you do, great, analysis stops there and you're approved. If you don't meet or equal a listing, Social Security will go to step 4. And in doing that, what they do is they create a residual functional capacity for you based on your medical records. They look at the medical records, they try to figure out what you are able to do physically and mentally, and then they take that RFC, which we'll talk about in a minute, and they see, okay, can you go back and do your past work with that RFC? And if so, then you're not disabled and you'll get a denial. If you cannot go back to your past work using the RFC that Social Security gave you, then they'll look at, okay, can you engage in any other work? Are there any other jobs that exist in the national economy that you can do? And at this step, and I think we do get into it a little bit, age does come into play. If you're under 50, basically Social Security is looking at, can you do any work? So they're not looking at just teacher work. They're not looking at, even if you've got a master's in education, a doctorate in psychology, they're not looking at, can you go back to what you were used to doing, but can you do any type of work? So that's what they're looking at stage 5. At age 50 and 55 and 60, that does change a little bit, but by and large, that's always going to be what they're looking at stage 5 is, can you do other work? It's just at 50, 55, and 60, the threshold of what it means to be able to engage in other work changes. All right, so here we've got the residual functional capacity levels. So at the sedentary exertional level, you cannot lift more than 10 pounds, ever, and occasional walking and standing. At light, which is, as you'll see in a few minutes, what most of the teacher dictionary of occupational title jobs are classified as, That means that you can lift and carry up to 20 pounds occasionally, 10 pounds frequently, and it requires frequent standing and walking. Okay. Medium exertional level, lifting and carrying up to 50 pounds occasionally, 25 pounds frequently, and again, frequent standing and walking. Heavy and very heavy exertional levels are above that. As I alluded to, and as we'll see in a minute, most of the Dictionary of Occupational Titles for teaching jobs put you at that light exertional level. However, if you've ever served as a preschool teacher or even as a kindergarten teacher, a special needs teacher, anything like that, you might think that is not a light job. That is more medium, and it very well could be. And so that's why, as we'll talk about in a minute, it's important to let Social Security know what you did in those jobs, especially if you are older 50, older than 50, over 50. All right, so when it comes to the residual functional capacity, you might have limitations in your ability to stand, walk, sit, lift or carry, climb stairs and ramps, climb ladders, ropes, and scaffolds, and your ability to bend, crouch, crawl, kneel, stoop. Those tend to be the biggest ones. There are, of course, visual limitations if you've got blindness. There are auditory limitations if you've got any kind of deafness. There are also limitations in your ability to interact with others, in your ability to keep pace, in your ability to those tend to be the most common ones, but there's so many that relate to physical and mental limitations. So if you have specific limitations from your doctors, make sure they're putting those in the notes. I see it time and time again where a client will come to me and they'll say, my doctor told me that I am not to lift any more than 8 pounds, and that is the heaviest thing I can lift, and I can only do that if I have both hands. Great. Where is it in the medical records? We look through all the medical records. It's not there. The other thing that we see is your doctor is telling you that, and then they say, but you're limited to light work. And that's what they put in the medical records. Well, light work, as you just saw, is you can lift and carry up to 20 pounds occasionally, 10 pounds frequently. Your doctor's telling you no more than 8 with both hands. So it's important that if your doctor puts things like that in the file, that they realize that this is what Social Security's definition of it is, and that's how they're going to define it. They're not going to define it as what your doctor is telling you. So that's super important. If your doctor's giving you those specific limitations, especially strict limitations like that, you'll want to make sure they're in the medical records exactly as the doctor has told you. All right, so along those lines, have your doctor either complete an RFC form. If you're one of our clients, we do give those to you. Those RFC forms can be very helpful for outlining all of your limitations. If the doctor cannot or will not do that, sometimes medical practices have a rule against that. They don't want to be brought into any litigation, despite me saying I have never seen a doctor be brought into, especially at the hearing level, litigation. A lot of practices, they just have that broad brush rule. That's fine. Will your doctor put those limitations in your records? Okay, if they won't fill this out, but they're telling you these are your limitations, that should be in the records anyways. So see if they'll put that in the records. It's also helpful if you have these limitations for the doctor to put why you have those limitations. What condition, what symptomatology, what is causing you to have the ability to stand for only 2 hours in an 8-hour day, only for 5 minutes at a time, and then you've got to sit down for 15 minutes. What's causing that? Is it the back pain? Is it the knees? Is it something totally else entirely? What's causing those limitations? That can be helpful. It is not enough for your doctor to say that you cannot work because of your conditions. It's not enough for the doctor to say you're disabled and unable to work. It's not enough for the doctor to say, in my medical opinion, Mr. Smith will never work again. That is not enough. I cannot tell you how many times a month I have that conversation with my clients. Social Security views that an issue reserved for the commissioner. The decision of whether or not you're disabled, whether or not you can go back to work in Social Security cases is an issue reserved for the commissioner. So your doctor might think that they are doing everything they can by putting, their neck on the line and saying, Mr. Smith will never, ever, ever go back to work. But then Social Security gets that and they're like, but that's our decision to make. So it's much more helpful if your doctor can put in there why you will never go back to work. Are you limited to time off task? Are you going to miss a day of work a week on a consistent basis? Are you limited to working 3 hours a day, 4 days a week? Why does your doctor think you will never go back to work? Again, if you have a lawyer, talk about this with them. Talk about what those limitations are. Talk about what your doctor's telling you. See what you can do to get to that point to where Social Security looks at it and goes, oh, yeah, this person will never work. They're disabled according to our rules. Okay. So that's the thing, is you've got to kind of learn or have somebody who knows what the agency is looking for. That's helpful. All right, so here we go. Here are the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. We start at the youngest age and move our way up. So here we've got a preschool teacher. Again, light work. I've got little kids. My little kids, well, my toddler is not light. She would be considered medium at this point. But my baby is still considered light. In any event, when you got one in each arm, that's not light work. And as a preschool teacher, you have far more than the two that I have at home. So chances are you are carrying two children, one in each arm throughout the day. You might have a bigger toddler. And I mean, truthfully, preschool, that goes up through 4. You've got 4-year-olds that are on, the medium size. Most of them are likely 25 pounds or more. So that's important to note. The Dictionary of Occupational Titles does have it as light, but when you're telling Social Security what you did, you've got to let them know what your physical requirements were and what you did in a typical day. So as you can see here, there are different potential classifications, but by and large, it's for the younger children. Okay. And as you can see, if you look down at the bottom, strength, light, and then you go over a little bit, SVP is 7. So it's a skilled job. And then the date last updated for the definition was in 1981. So it's been 40 years since it was last updated, and preschool teachers have changed a bit over time. Here we get to kindergarten teacher. Again, you'll see it's light. Again, you'll see it's SVP of 7, and you'll see that the date this was last updated was in 1977. So this has also not quite been updated in a long time. As you'll see here, we are starting to get to a level of true school education, book smarts. Preschool is all about learning how to be a person. As you get into kindergarten, it is still continuing. We're all still learning how to be a person, quite frankly. It's still learning how to be a person, but you're starting to get into a little bit more of the school learning set. So there's the definition for kindergarten teacher. And just because you are or were a kindergarten teacher does not mean this is going to be your DOT code. It's just most likely what's going to line up with it. Here you've got elementary school teacher. Okay, so again, still teaching them how to be a person, but here we've got may specialize by the subject taught, such as math, science, social studies. Again, strength is light, SVP is 7. This definition was last updated in 1981. Unless you are dealing with more of the special education students, at 1st grade through 5th grade, you are likely not having to pick up and carry most of those students. At this point, they are on the heavier side. So light, though, do you ever have to carry a box of copy paper from your classroom down to the copier? Is the copier right across the hall from you, or is it all the way down the hall and you've got to carry that box of copy paper there and back? So think about those kinds of things. What about manipulatives? Do you need to bring manipulatives to your classroom? Do they stay in the classroom? Are they in the classroom all the time, but you still have to bring them out from your big closet to put them onto your desk or the reading desk? Whatever it is, just think about that. What did you do in a typical week, month? Same with when you're getting your classroom set up, okay? We all know teachers spend a lot of their own money on getting their rooms set up. They've got curtains, they've got carpets, they've got decor to make it as homey and comfortable for the students as possible. When you bring that stuff into your room, even if you're only doing it once a year, or if you're trading it out every season, so you do it at the beginning of the year, you do it again in November, you do it again in January, you do it again in March, you're still doing it every couple months. So that's important to note too when you're talking to Social Security about what you are lifting, carrying, how far you're doing it, things like that. And typically, elementary school teachers, they are standing all day long, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've been in elementary school. My girls aren't that old yet. But when I was in middle and high school, I guess it was really only middle school, I volunteered at the elementary school in the mornings. It was right next door to my elementary school and middle school, right next door to each other. So I went over and volunteered with my teachers so my mom could drop my little sisters off and me off all at the same time. And then I would walk over to the middle school. A lot of us did it. It was a lot of fun. Anyways, secondary school. So here we've got kind of into the older students. So we're still probably not carrying our students around, but we do still have things that we are carrying around. If you're teaching high school and you've got 5 periods in one day and you ask them all to do, a heavy booklet of a test, are you having to carry that home with you? How are you getting that home? Is it coming home in the roller bag? Is it coming home in your arms? How are you getting that in and out of the school? Okay. So think about those kinds of things. And I'm sure there's a ton of other scenarios that I'm not even thinking of because I'm not a teacher, but just those are from what I can think of in my experience. So think about that. Think about the whole year, start to finish, what you would do. Obviously, we're looking at more specifically on a regular basis. That's the most important parts, but you still want to notate the things that you would only do, even if it was just a couple times a year. The other thing I forgot to mention is if you're doing like physical education, that is probably not going to be a light job. That's probably more towards medium or heavy. So that's important to note as well. Same with even science teachers. Some of the stuff that they bring in and out of the classroom. Reading teachers, do you get to keep all your books in the classroom or do you have to take them back and forth? So just think about all that kind of stuff. Okay. Like I said, I used to want to be a teacher, but I am not. And so there's a lot of stuff that I know that goes on behind the scenes that I've never seen. So just think about that kind of stuff. And here we go. We've even got the DOT code for college and university faculty. So again, that's light, SVP of 8, and this was last updated in 1981. Okay. So you can see each of the DOT codes. There's the website that I pull it from. There's up at the top is the actual code number. So you can search for any of these. You can also put in to Google just DOT, teacher, and that'll pop up a lot of these. All right. So all of the DOT titles that we sampled just then are light, and they are all skilled or semi-skilled. So in this case, transferable skills are critical if you're 50 and older. Those are super important to make note of what you did on a daily basis, because what will happen is Social Security will classify that past work. They'll identify transferable skills that you have to see, can you do any type of sedentary work? And again, that's super important for 50, particularly 55 and 60 and older. Okay, so it's important to explain to Social Security what your job duties were. Here we've got the grid rules. If you are 50 to 54, you can see at sedentary, you can be found disabled if you have got no ability for, we're down here at 20114, if you cannot make direct entry into skilled work and you don't have any transferable skills. That will result in a finding of disability if you are between 50 and 54 with a past work history as a teacher. Okay. If Social Security says you can do light work, that does not grid you out. If you are 55 and older and limited to sedentary work, again, look here at 20106. If you are not able to make a direct entry into skilled work and you have skills that are not transferable, then you can be found disabled under the grid rules. At light, it's the same type of thing. If you 20206, we're looking at, you've got a high school degree, you cannot make a direct entry into skilled work, and you have skilled or semi-skilled work and your skills are not transferable, then you'll be found disabled again. And so that's important to note that in order to reach the grid rule as a teacher, you have to be unable to go back to work as a teacher and then unable to, like I said, make a direct entry into skilled work and have skills that are not transferable. So there's a lot of things that kind of have to come into play. It's a little easier if you're limited to sedentary work, but still, that's kind of where we are. All right. As promised, there are some special concerns for teachers. Not everybody knows these. Eligibility for Social Security coverage depends on your state and your local school district. Okay. A little over half of the 50 states opt into Social Security. 12 states and DC opted out. So if you work in one of those 12 states or Washington, DC, and you opted out of Social Security, and you've only ever taught in one of those 12 states or DC, you will likely not qualify for Social Security. 5 states are mixed, so they leave it up to the county to decide. Some counties opt in, some counties opt out. Again, if you've only ever worked in a state or a county where they have opted out, then you would not qualify for SSDI benefits on your own record. If you have a spouse, then you may be able to qualify under theirs, but most of the time, teachers do qualify because a little over half of the states have opted in. But again, 12 states and DC opted out. I do believe Texas is one of the ones that's either mixed or opted out entirely. So that's something to note, because we got a big population in Texas. Now, you may have a reduction in your Social Security benefits if you are eligible for both a teacher's retirement and Social Security. I've had cases where a teacher used to teach in a state that opted out, and then they came to Florida where we opted in. And so they were able to get both their pension from when they worked back in the old state and also Social Security, but there's a windfall elimination provision for that. There's a government pension offset. They're both a little bit different. They apply in different ways, but just something to note. If you are eligible for teacher's retirement and Social Security, there might be a reduction in the Social Security benefits. So that's important. That website there is where I pulled the statistics for the states that have opted in and opted out of Social Security. So that if you are interested in seeing what the states are, you can certainly Google it, but that is the website that I used. All right, nearing the end. How can an attorney help you? So what we do, and like I said, this is just a small sampling of what we do. We can provide guidance on what correspondence from Social Security actually means. We file any necessary appeals if you hire us in enough time. We review your medical records and your case file. We discuss what additional records would be helpful in your case, and we review your documents for accuracy and completeness. I will always tell my clients that get those adult function reports or supplemental pain questionnaire, supplemental cardiac questionnaire. Oh, can you fill this out for me? No, I can't. I don't know what you go through on a daily basis. What I can do is review what you say and have that conversation with you. It can be more of a conversation. We can say, okay, what do you go through on a daily basis? Okay, so you're able to shower independently, and nobody needs to be home. Well, no, my husband's always got to be home and in the bedroom in case I fall. Okay, well, you can't shower independently then. You got to make note of that. We talk about kind of along those lines what Social Security is looking for in their forms. We cannot fill them out for you. We don't know what you go through on a daily basis. We'd be doing you a disservice if we completely filled them out for you. We do work with you and the agency to provide relevant updates back and forth. If necessary, we prepare you for a hearing before an administrative law judge, and we question you and any witnesses, including a medical witness or a vocational witness, during your hearing. So that's, again, a small sampling of what we do, but just to kind of give you an idea of what it is we do. All right. As promised, because as discussed, I do not take any questions on the live webinar, and I don't respond to comments on the replay. Here's how you can get in touch. If you are watching live, take down the phone number, take down the email address. Feel free to send us an email, give us a call. We are absolutely happy to help in any way that we can. If you are watching it on the replay, feel free, call, email. There is also a link below to schedule a call at a time convenient for everybody. So thank you so much for joining me. If you are watching us live, I can also put the link to schedule a call in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, thanks so much for joining. Everybody have a great day.